Hi everyone, and welcome to the first week of lectures for the Business Management module in this first semester of 2019. What we're going to first do is we're going to explore the chapter introduction for this week so that we can understand why we are learning what we are learning. Then what we're going to do is we're going to explore the chapter outcomes just in terms of what you need to know at the end of this week. And then we're going to look at the prescribed reading, which is the reading from your module textbook and the reading which you need to go through in order to familiarize yourself with specific concepts. And then we're going to jump right into the academic content that we need to look at for this week. So this week, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be introducing you to the exciting world of business. We're going to explore the question, what is business? And we're going to provide an overview and an understanding of business fundamentals. What we're going to look at, just in terms of the introductory chapter, is we're going to look at the general nature of a business as an entity, the management of that entity, and then we're going to consider the business entity as part of an open system. What we're also going to be doing is we're going to consider the stakeholders in this open system, and we're going to identify those stakeholders, we're going to discuss those stakeholders, and then we're going to look at what the organization's responsibilities are in terms of the greater environment, in terms of looking at it from a corporate social responsibility perspective. What you will be required to know and to know how to do by the end of this week is the following. You should be able to give a valid and universal definition of the nature of a business. You should be able to give valid and universal definitions of the terms management and manager. You should also be able to classify businesses according to profit and motive. You should also be able to talk around the identification of resources involved in the running of the business. You should be able to explain the concept of systems thinking. You should be able to identify various stakeholders in the business environment. You should also be able to recognize the impact that the various stakeholders have on the South African business. You should also be able to describe the concept of corporate social responsibility, and you need to outline the principles of the social contract. What is required of you for this week's work is to have a look at chapter 1 of the module textbook. It starts on page 1 of your business management textbook and it is titled Business and Its Challenges. Please read through that chapter, and then also there are a list of recommended readings on page 2 of the module textbook for this particular week's work. If you do have access to the internet, please try and access the articles which come from different places so that you can get some more foundational perspectives for business and business management. Now that we have all the issues around the outcomes and the chapter introduction out of the way, let's jump right into the academic content. And the first question I'm going to ask is, what is business? How do we define business? What is the nature of business? And if you look on your textbook, you'll see that we define business as a legal entity that is formed with the intention of making goods, selling goods, or providing a service in order to make a profit. So if we think about examples of a business, it may be that we go and we buy stock at a warehouse for stationery, and we buy pencils and we buy pens and erasers and books, any stationery that we would be required to use in schools, and then we make a business out of it by selling it or providing a good, or selling the good or providing the service. So that is how a business is in terms of legal jargon. But how a business operates and how it seeks profit and how it makes money also determines how the business is structured. So ideally, if we buy a whole bunch of items that we would like to sell, we want to make profit from it, because it's not just about us paying 5 Rand for something and then selling it for 5 Rand again. So that wouldn't make any sense. What we would do is then we would say, okay, to run this business in terms of making profit also, then we would be required to say, okay, how are we structuring this business? What are we doing to keep the business running? And so, what are we also doing to ensure that the business is running in its most practical way? So, it makes sense for me to think about it. I like baking. So I think to myself, I could open a baking business and provide cakes and cupcakes and muffins and um, tea time treats. And I think, what do I need to do? What do I want out of this business? And what I think about is I say, okay, I need to buy ingredients to make all these cakes and cupcakes and treats. So that's going to cost me money. Then I need to say, is there a market for those tea time treats? Is there a market if I bring cupcakes and muffins and cakes to work? Could I sell them? How much would I sell them for? Because at the end of the day, I don't want to make a loss. I want to make profit and I want to make money out of my cake business. So I need to say, okay, how will my business function in the best possible way to make it a sound business? Am I going to now hire 7 different people that can bake cakes to come and work in my business? No, it's not lucrative for me to do it at the moment. So, this is the idea of form follows function. All the functional parts of my cake business are logically put together to form a sound business. So, I'm not going to appoint 7 different bakers if only one is required to do the job. But what I also need to think about is, okay, people and processes are important in terms of how I run my business and how I want the business to succeed. Then I need to say, okay, I have this idea that I want to open a cake business. Is that what my business is going to offer? That is the good that my business is going to offer. And a good is a tangible thing that can be traded. So I make a delicious cupcake, I sell it to you for 25 Rand, you pay me 25 Rand for it. It's something that is traded. At the same time, I could offer a service in my business and I can say, okay, I can cater for your wedding and I can do all the wedding cakes and wedding desserts. It's a service that I'm going to offer with my goods. And so that service is an intangible entity that can be traded with. So it's very important, if we're using my cake business as an example, or my possible cake business as an example, to say, all right, that is the nature of my business. I need to make it function in the best way possible to make it a sound business. And I also need to say, okay, do I need people? What processes do I need to put into place to make sure that my business runs effectively? And that's something that we're going to touch on in a few slides. But remember, people and processes are crucial to the business and help it succeed. So, for the purposes of teaching you about the nature of business, I'm going to continue with my cake baking business example. So, here I have this idea that I'm going to open a cake baking business. Businesses make profit. We established that from the slide before, that we want to make money out of it. We want to offer a service, but we're not going to pay 5 Rand for something and then sell it again for 5 Rand. So I need to think, in my cake business, what am I going to do to make profit? Businesses make profit. And this brings us to our idea and our concept around profit-seeking organizations. Profit-seeking organizations have one aim, and this is what we must remember. It is to make a profit and in so doing create wealth for its owners. So in the case of our profit-seeking business, or in the case of the example of my cake business, I want to calculate my monthly profit by adding up all the costs that I have incurred for the month. So say I have 7 customers, and out of those 7 customers, I've made a dozen cupcakes for one customer, I've made tea time treats for another customer, I've made a wedding cake for another customer. That involves cost because I've had to pay for the ingredients. So I'm going to take that business cost and I'm going to subtract it from the income made from the sales of those cakes and the service that I've offered. So for now, what we need to say is, okay, our total income minus our total costs is equal to profit. And it shows it right there in the diagram that you're looking at now on the PowerPoint slide. If I'm making a loss, my total income is low, and I take that total income and I subtract it from my total cost. And let's say wheat was expensive for that week, or the price of wheat has gone up, and so flour is more expensive, and so I've spent more money on flour and sugar than what I should have been spending. Then that is my total cost, which is high. So I've subtracted my low income from all the sales that I've made. I've subtracted it from the total costs that I've incurred making all those cakes and cupcakes, and I haven't made any money from it. So that is a loss. And that is what we need to remember. That is the loss. If I make money and my total income minus my total costs is more than what my total costs were, then that's the profit. If it's less, then the business has made a loss. So that brings us to the idea of, okay, do I mark up my prices? So for a 5 kg of flour, I would say pay 19 Rand 99 if it was on special. Other days I'd pay 35 Rand 99. If I haven't spent a lot of money on the flour that I use in my cakes, then there's a potential for me to make profit if I mark up the price of my good that I'm selling. Markup is important because we increase the price when we sell the item to the customer so that we can make profit. And so this provides money for me, for my shop, for the operation of the cake business. And then if I've got people that I've employed, but we haven't employed people yet, but if we had people, we'd be able to pay their salaries out. We must remember that the need for making a profit in a business is so that the business will have money with which to carry on trading. So if we're a profit-seeking organization, we need to have owners and investors who put money into the business. They front the money for the business. And so then we need to say, okay, what do these owners or what do these investors think about in terms of the risk, in terms of how much they're putting up front? How much are they prepared to lose versus how much do they expect to gain? And what they expect to gain is also known as the return on investment. So we can mark up the cakes that we sell, or we can mark up the prices of stationery that we've bought wholesale, and then we make the profit. But we need the money to buy the ingredients, or we need the money to buy the stock, and that is where investors put the money in. That's the amount of risk that they are gambling with. If we aren't a profit-seeking organization, we can be a non-profit seeking organization. Non-profit seeking organizations serve a public purpose, so it's mostly in the education or the health or the social welfare or charity sectors. We still need to get money into the organization or into the business. But those funds or that money is channeled back into the causes it supports, and there aren't any profits shown for shareholders. So what we've looked at is two organizations, a profit-seeking one and a non-profit seeking one. Remember, both need funds. How they utilize the funds and what is the end game of those funds differentiates the two. Profit-seeking, you make money. You're expected to make money. Non-profit, you also make money, but the shareholders don't see that money. It's funded back into the causes that they believe in. Now that we understand the difference between a profit and a non-profit organizational business, let's think about the factors of production. What are the factors of production? So, the factors of production look at the resources that businesses rely on to produce valuable products. So, if I open my cake making business as an example, or I open my stationery business, what do I rely on to produce my product? Well, for starters, we can think about the cake business. I need ingredients to bake those cakes. Then I need some kind of demand for those cakes. When we're looking at the factors of production, we've got four different factors: natural resources, human resources, capital, and entrepreneurship. Natural resources are those things like land, water, and minerals. They're all naturally occurring resources that are valuable in their organic form. Human resources are the labor or the people who work within the organization. Capital is how much money. We need money to start up the business. We need money to pay people to work in the business. So, do we have an incurring debt? So, do we have a bank loan for a startup for our business? Or do we sell shares in the business and people invest into the business? Regardless of how we get that capital is important for us to start out our business. The other factor is entrepreneurship. What is an entrepreneur? It's someone who identifies business opportunities and then explores an opportunity to start the new venture. Here in South Africa, it's very important for us to have entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs play a vital role in our economy. It's estimated that 40% of our South African workforce is made up of entrepreneurs. If I have the idea about my cake making business, does that make me an entrepreneur? Well, first and foremost, I have to think about it. I have to say, okay, there is an opportunity for me to have a home cake baking business. Why is there an opportunity? Because maybe people are asking around for home bakers. So I see that opportunity, I explore it then by starting the new venture, and that's what makes me an entrepreneur. What we also need to look at is what makes entrepreneurs succeed? What kind of characteristics do people have to make them entrepreneurs? Is it someone that's committed? Because look, if we're starting a business on our own, it's going to take time, it's going to take dedication. We need to be committed. We also need to be determined. We need to be motivated. We also have to be quite creative because who's to say my home baking different business is different from somebody else's home baking business? Then I need to be self-reliant. I need to know, okay, if I'm opening this business, I'm the person that's making the money here, which means I have to rely on my skill, my ingredients, my money, whatever it might be. I also need to be quite adaptable. What if there's a new type of cake? What if people are looking for an ice cream cake and not just a normal cake made out of flour and eggs and sugar and milk? So I need to be adaptable to my environment. I also have to be risk tolerant. So that means then that I need to take risks. I need to train myself to savor any times where there are peaks of business, but also if there's no business or I'm tired or I'm frustrated and exhausted and things aren't working, that shows my risk tolerance. And then I need to be obsessed with opportunity. I need to say, okay, this opportunity is here for me to make this cake business work. What are the opportunities? I must keep exploring, keep researching to understand how my business is going to work. I need to be competitive. And then also, I need to have leadership ability because without myself being a leader or without me being able to make decisions about the business, I wouldn't be a very good leader. We've discussed business, we've discussed the types of business in terms of profit and non profit, we've looked at risk, we've looked at the characteristics of being an entrepreneur. Now we need to understand, how is our business going to function in a bigger system? Because it's not just me baking from home, trying to get clients. It's based on me functioning within a greater system. How do I then acquire the greatest possible benefit given my limited resources? So I may be limited in capital, which is our money. I may be limited in terms of resources, in terms of people. So it might be that I work a full time job from 8 to 5, and then I start my cake business from 6 in the evening until midnight. What kinds of resources are there? So, how do I get the best possible benefit? And that best possible benefit is known as the economic principle. In our country, we need to ensure that we have an economic principle that we abide by. Because with any business, we need to generate sufficient income to cover any of the costs so that we make in terms of the capital. We need to be able to pay suppliers and staff, and we need to make enough profit to maintain the business. So, if we use the economic principle and we use economic systems, those are systems which are organized ways in which a country allocates its resources to the needs of a country's citizens through goods and services. So when our Minister of Finance does his budget speech, we understand the South African economic system that is at play. Where is government allocating resources and funds? What kinds of economic systems are there? There are 4 economic systems. We speak mostly about 2 of them, which is the capitalism one and the communism one. But I'm going to discuss all 4 with you right now. With the capitalism system, what it suggests is that the system is based on private ownership of production and the creation of goods or services for profit. There's very little government interference, so you can use the system freely in terms of the resources, and you are free to work how and where you want. That is why it's called a capitalism system or a free market system. With communism, on the other hand, it's a movement to create a moneyless social order which is structured upon common ownership when it comes to things like production and social, political, and economic platforms. So, here in communism, the government would own the majority of the resources and they would decide when, where, what, and by whom goods and services are produced. So, I would not be able to say, while I'm sitting in my office right now, I want to start a home baking business. Under communism, I would be allocated a resource. I would be part of a decision that is made by government to offer that particular service. Communism is also known as the command system. With socialism, it's a system characterized by social ownership and cooperative management. It refers to cooperative businesses, common ownership, direct public ownership, or autonomous state businesses. The government owns most of the strategic resources, transportation, communications, health services, and they also play a significant role in the economy. But individuals are allowed to own private property and less important forms of business, which are then run through a private initiative. A mixed system is where the government and the private sector direct the economy. There's a degree of private economic freedom mixed with a degree of government regulation and markets. So we generally see a blend of these systems. Now I want you to think about it. What kind of system is functioning right now in South Africa? Is it a communism one? Is it a capitalism one? Is it a socialism one? Or is it a mixed one? Think about it, and as we go through the lectures, things will start to make sense in terms of businesses, business ownership, and the role that government plays in business ownership, and the role of the greater system when we open a business. So we ended off the last slide by asking, what kind of system do we have in South Africa? Now I want you to think about, who are the stakeholders? Who influences South African business? If we define stakeholders, they're groups which have potential or real power to influence an organization's decisions and actions. And if you look on your PowerPoint screen now, you'll see these groups are consumer groups. Who wants what? Is there a demand for it? Trade unions. What is at play in terms of trade union activity? Who are the suppliers? How much control do those suppliers have over the ingredients or the supplies that we need? Then we need to look at trade associations. Are there associations that are particular to a trade? Who are the employees in the organization? Who are the shareholders in the organization? Who are the customers? Who is demanding? Who are the competitors? What government agencies are at play? What pension funds are available? Who are the banks that have given your business a loan? Who are the creditors? All of those groups or stakeholders can add pressure on a business if for any reason it is mismanaged or there are irregularities that occur. At the same time, you need to look at the company stakeholders. And I've indicated on the PowerPoint slide to have a look at figure 5 on page 18 of the module textbook. There, you'll see company stakeholders in terms of employees, investors, government, community, consumers, the environment, which we're going to see in a bit is very important, industry associations, and extended organizations. A satisfied stakeholder, this is something we must remember, will always be a good diplomat for a business. In the previous slide, I mentioned that the environment is very important in terms of company stakeholders. So why is it important? So let's look at something called corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility, or CSR as it's known in the wider business field, refers to the obligation of organizations to consider the interests of customers, employees, shareholders, communities, and ecological environments in all aspects of their operations. It is the business's duty to pursue long-term goals that are good for society. So if we have a business and we say, okay, I'm running my business, what is the impact on the greater community for the way I conduct my business? And it's expected that I conduct my business in an ethical way. I respond positively to any emerging societal priorities and expectations. I need to act ahead of regulatory confrontation, so I must abide by regulatory rules. I must have a balance in shareholder interest, and I must be a good citizen in the community. Businesses do not have an unquestioned right to operate in society. So it's very, very important that the management of any business acknowledges that they depend on society and that we function within the community and that we function within society for the betterment of society. And so the basic premise is that we as a business, if we own a business, has responsibility to various groups in society, even to the natural environment. And so we must not have a narrow shareholder interest. So, what do we do then? We create a social contract which occurs between business and society, and it involves mutual obligations where society and the wider system and business recognize that they have some kind of obligation to each other. How do we ensure then that organizations are sticking to the corporate social responsibility that they have? Well, first and foremost, because CSR is about obligations, we need to create something called social conscience, where the business has been around for a long time and their interests are aligned to that of the greater system. What we then do now, because we need to ensure that all businesses are following through with their CSR, we have something called triple bottom line reporting. Triple bottom line reporting requires companies not only to report on their economic status, but also on the environmental and social impact associated with their performance. So, if we happen to be an oil company and we run this business and we are not good to the environment and we create oil spills, then we are not sticking to our corporate social responsibility. Then we need to look at our triple bottom line. And the triple bottom line is made up of 3 P's: profit, people, and planet. If you look on the diagram that's now showing on your PowerPoint slide, we've got the environmental impact, which is the planet. We've got the economic returns, which is your profit. We've got social impact in terms of people. And then we've got sustainability. And the sustainability one, although not part of the 3 Ps, is there to ensure that the corporate social responsibility of the company is solid and sustainable for everyone. And so businesses need to be committed to corporate social responsibility, and they need to produce a triple bottom line report annually. So organizations are required to become responsible citizens. So if I have my cake baking business, what is the requirement or my responsibility in terms of CSR? Wastage may be a problem. So I need to say, okay, my environmental impact ensures that I throw away my wastage in a way that is manageable and it's not just being piled on a rubbish dump somewhere. At the same time, my economic returns is my profit. How is that profit impacting on the greater system? And then also my social impact in terms of people. What am I doing to ensure that I am not harming, that it is not affecting negatively in the greater system? And am I able to sustain it? What I want you to do now, because we've come to the end of the lecture, is I want you to think about what would you do in terms of what we've learned now about business and setting up the business. How would you go about setting up your business? Firstly, what would you do in terms of profit or non-profit? Which one would you be selecting? Then you need to think about who your relevant stakeholders are. Where will you get that capital from? What is your corporate social responsibility to the greater system? Think about those and reflect on that, because later on in the semester we'll be thinking about a business plan and thinking about how we can set up and develop our own business. Once you've done thinking about that, what I want you to do is reflect on this week's lectures. Because by now we have come to the end of the PowerPoint. You've looked at the glossary of terms that I've posted on ICANN. You've probably read your module textbook chapter. If you haven't already done so, please do so before the end of the week. Then, what I want you to think about is say, what was the one most useful thing you learned in this week's lecture? What suggestions would you give other people to get the most out of this chapter? Then I want you to list 3 ways you think you've developed or grown as a result of looking at this chapter. What was the things you knew before? What were the things you didn't know at all about this? And then I want you to reflect on what problems and or challenges you encountered in this chapter. Now, I've run through quite a bit of material over the last 15 slides. So, number 4 of the self reflection is very important. If there is anything you don't understand around the academic content, or you have a challenge with the academic content, please feel free to email me or call me on the office line. I've sent the details through via the orientation email. The details are also up on the ICANN page for getting hold of myself or for getting hold of Nathan. Please, please, if you're experiencing any problems or you get to that part of the self-reflection and you realize, I didn't actually understand corporate social responsibility, or I didn't understand the concept of entrepreneurship, whatever it may be, please contact me. My job is to guide you, to teach you, to help you master the knowledge of business management. So I'm always here for you to email. Now that we've reached the end of this lecture, also what I want you to do is there is a knowledge check quiz on ICANN. Once you've gone through the motions of the PowerPoint, reading the chapter, maybe asking for clarification for concepts from me, then what I want you to do is do the knowledge check. The knowledge check will help you in terms of if there's a gap in your understanding, then you can go back and have a look or a listen at the PowerPoint. Until next week, have a lovely week and happy studying.